Hello friends, I welcome you again to this channel where we are learning English language and literature. Friends, in this video today we are going to discuss the important characteristics of lyric poetry. Friends, in my previous video I told that poetry is considered as the ancient art of literature. It has been written since time immemorial. In the ancient times, people used to sing some songs in the company of a musical instrument which is known as a lyre, Lyre. Okay, some songs were sung in the ancient times, some songs were sung in the company of the lyre, and that's why that song was named as lyric in those times. Friends, Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, he wrote the Poetics. The Poetics is a critical treatise written in Greek language, and in this Poetics, Aristotle has discussed the kinds of poetry which were existing, which were written, which were popular in his times. So, according to Aristotle, there are three kinds of poetry, and they are epic poetry, dramatic poetry, and lyric poetry. Epic is a long narrative poem, what we know as Mahakavya in Hindi. That is epic in English. Then the second type of poetry, according to Aristotle, is dramatic poetry. And the third one, which we want to discuss today in detail, is lyrical poetry. We don't want to go into the details of what a lyric is because we have already discussed that in our previous video. But let me remind you again the definition of lyric, that a lyric is a short musical poem. It is very short and it has some musical quality, and it expresses the personal emotions or experiences of the poet. This is the common definition of lyric as we understand. Friends, we want to discuss the salient features, the important characteristics of this lyric form in English literature. So, as you can see on the screen, these are the characteristics of lyric. Number one, simplicity of language. Why simplicity of language? Because lyrics are meant for the common man and women. So the language has to be very simple. Number two, single idea or emotion is presented in the lyric. Why? Because it is very short. So the poet does not have a large scope to play. So the lyric is focusing on one single idea. Third important characteristic of lyric is brevity. Brevity means not too long. Lyrics have to be very short in size. Fourth one is subjectivity. Subjectivity means the personal element is found in the lyrics. The poet tries to express his personal emotions, and that makes the lyric a subjective poem. And the last and most important quality of lyric is music, is melody and rhymes. One by one, friends, we are going to discuss all these characteristics now. The first and foremost important characteristic of lyric is simplicity of language. Why? Because as I told you, lyric is written only for the common man and women. And if the language is difficult, the ordinary readers or the ordinary common man and women won't be able to understand the lyric, because lyric is a poem of enjoyment. It is a poem of celebration, and in such poems, the language has to be very simple. The language should be used in such a manner, that it directly appeals the mind and heart of the readers. The language must be so easy, that every reader understands and enjoys the poem. You can take this example. Robert Frost, an English poet, he has written this nice, very popular lyric. The title of that lyric is Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. See the language. I have given you this example to mark the kind of simple language used by such a great poet. Even the great poets use very simple language when they are expressing their ideas, their emotions in a lyric. See these lines. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. See, easy language. You won't find, even a child understands these words. You won't find any such difficult language, any such phraseological kind of a language. I mean, the poets, they are scholar people, but they don't have any scope to make a pomp and show of their knowledge of language. Why? Because it is a lyric. The lyric allows only simple language. Another important characteristic of lyric is the presentation of a single idea or a single emotion. Lyrics mainly present or express one single idea. Because why? Because the lyrics are shorter in length. The lyric poet does not have too much ground to play. Like if you compare the lyric poet with an epic poet, then this difference comes out, that the epic is a long narrative poem. The epic poem is written in about 1000 lines and sometimes more than 1000 lines. So there is a scope of expressing so many themes or so many ideas together. But lyric is generally written in hardly 10, 15, 20, 30 lines. It is very short, and that's why there is a scope of one single idea in the lyric. The common themes of lyric in English literature are like love. The poets write lyrics on the topic of love, sometimes on the war, sometimes on the theme of friendship, sometimes on the theme of grief, disappointment, loneliness, sometimes on the topic of nature, sometimes on the topic of beauty. These are some common topics, common themes which are taken up by the lyric poets in English literature. I have given you one example. Say for example, John Milton's sonnet on his blindness. It expresses one idea. What is that idea? The idea is that Milton's disappointment, Milton's grief. If you take another example, Edmund Waller's poem, Go Lovely Rose, it expresses the idea of love. Simple. So, single idea or single emotion is another important characteristic of any lyric in English literature. Third important quality of lyric is brevity. Brevity means short in size. The lyric poets, unlike the epic poets, they do not have a large scope of expression. Epic poet has a huge ground to play. Why? Because he writes his poetry in more than 1,000 lines. But a lyric poet writes his poetry hardly between 10 to 30 lines, and that's why brevity is very important. Brevity is a must in lyric. Why? Because it is sung, and it is sung by and for the common man and women. क्योंकि अगर आपको गाना गाना है तो गाना बहुत ज़्यादा लंबा अगर हो गया तो फिर गाने में वो चार्म जो ब्यूटी होती है वो हाथ में से निकल जाती है. मीन्स द ब्यूटी रिमेन्स इन पोएट्री. व्हेन यू आर सिंगिंग अ पोएम, ब्यूटी रिमेन्स इन इट only if it is very short in size. Sonnets, say for example, are written in 14 lines only, and sonnet is a type of a lyric. It is short as only one idea and one emotion is expressed by the poet. Generally, in these short poems, lyrics, the first stanza expresses, or you can say introduces, the idea. The remaining 2-3 stanzas, they develop the idea, and at the end the last stanza concludes the whole discussion or concludes the thought which was presented in the first stanza. So generally the lyrics have this structure: introduction of the idea in the first stanza, then remaining 2-3 stanzas the development of that thought, and the last stanza presents the resolution of the problem which is presented in the beginning. Another, let's take this example of William Wordsworth's poem lyric Daffodils. This is a very popular lyric written by the poet of nature William Wordsworth. In this poem, in this lyric, as I told you, the first stanza introduces the problem which is developed later on in the second, third and fourth stanza, and in the last stanza the resolution or the solution to the problem is presented by William Wordsworth. If you read the first stanza, the first 2 lines, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. In these lines, William Wordsworth expresses his loneliness. Loneliness is the thought which is presented here in the first stanza. I wandered lonely as a cloud. But if you read the last 2 lines, the last stanza, it comes with a solution to the problem of loneliness which is presented in the first stanza. Read these last lines. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So, at the end of the poem, the poet says, my heart is filled with pleasure. So, loneliness which is presented in the beginning, the solution is pleasure. The company of daffodils makes the poet happy at the end of the poem. So, this is the structure. Though it is very short, brevity is an important characteristic of lyric, but this brevity, short poem, introduces the thought in the beginning, develops the thought in the middle, and it is concluded at the end in the last stanza. Another important characteristic of a lyric poetry is subjectivity. Subjectivity means personal by nature. Lyric poems are personal poems. Why? Because here the poets, they express their own emotions, and that is the reason why they are known as personal poems, they are known as subjective poems. In these poems, in lyrics, generally we see that the poet is using the words like I, my, we, and all such words. First person words, first person pronouns are used in these poems, lyrics. Why? Because they are subjective poems. Here, the speaker means the poet, directly addresses the readers, invoking his own personal feelings and expressions. Let's have a look at some of the important poems in which you find subjectivity. The same example which we discussed earlier, daffodils. In this poem, the poet expresses his own grief. He says, I wandered lonely as a cloud. The poet is talking about his loneliness. Okay, subjectivity. In the same manner, there is another important poet of English literature, Robert Burns. He has written this poem, this lyric, Red, Red Rose. Now, if you read these lines, which I have presented here on the screen, you find that this poem is also subjective poem. This poem is also personal poem. It expresses the personal love, the feelings of love of Robert Burns. Read these lines. Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like a melody that's sweetly played in tune. So the poet is talking about his love. That he is using the word my love. So subjective poem. Another important characteristic of lyric is music and melody. Why music and melody? Because as I told you in the beginning, lyric in the ancient times was meant to be sung. उर्मी काव्य गाने के लिए लिखा गया था पुराने ज़माने में. तो गाने के लिए जो काव्य लिखा जाता है उसमें म्यूज़िक, संगीत होना ज़रूरी है. सो म्यूज़िकल क्वालिटी is the heart and soul of every lyric. Why? Because it is meant to be sung. Okay. Musical quality of lyric makes it more charming, more alarming, and more appealing. It appeals our heart. When music is there, it makes the poem more pleasing for the readers. Mostly, in English lyrics, this music, this quality of music comes from where? It comes from the 4 important meters of English poetry. The poets in English lyrics, they generally use iambus or trochee or anapist or dactyl. These are the important meters of English poetry which make it musical. What is iambus, trochee, anapist, and dactyl? That we don't want to enter into that detail right now because it will take a longer time. I will talk about these 4 things maybe in my next video, but these are the meters which make the poetry musical. Okay. Rhyming is also found in every lyric. Rhyming, you understand? The last words rhyme with one another. Okay? Like so and go, like day and bay. Okay? It is called rhyming. So rhyming is also important in lyrics. It adds extra beauty to the lyrics. And another last important thing which makes it musical is the use of refrain. Refrain means repetition of the lines. one line or one particular phrase is repeated more than once, that also adds beauty and music to the lyrics. I have taken one example from William Shakespeare's poems. William Shakespeare has written this poem, Sigh No More Ladies. You see, we want to examine how musical quality is so beautifully found in this poem. You see, when we read this poem, there is a proper rhythm. When we sing this, when we recite this poem, there is a nice rhythm which is found. You mark that rhythm. Also, you mark the rhyming at the end of the lines. Like if you say the first line, more is the last word. More rhymes with the third line, sure. Okay. Second line, ever. The word ever rhymes with the last word of the fourth line, never. So more and sure, ever and never. In the same manner, so and go. These are the last words of the fifth and sixth line. Okay. In the same manner, bonny and nonny. Again, they are rhyming. So this rhyming adds music to the lyrics. Now see what kind of music is there in this poem, Sigh No More Ladies, written by a great poet, a great dramatist, William Shakespeare. Sigh no more, ladies, sigh no more. Men were deceivers ever, 1 foot in sea, 1 foot on shore, to one thing constant never. Then sigh not so, but let them go, and be you blithe and bonny, converting all your sounds of woe into hey, nonny, nonny. I hope you got the point. The point is that the music, the quality of music in this poem makes it more beautiful. How rhythm is found in the words. Sigh no more, ladies, sigh no more. Men were deceivers ever, 1 foot in sea and 1 foot on shore. Kind of rhythm is found, music is found in Shakespeare's Sigh No More Ladies. Okay, and now here we come to the end of this discussion on the characteristics of lyric. But before I depart, before I take your leave, let me conclude the whole discussion that lyric is a short musical poem which expresses the personal emotions of the poet. It originated in Greece. It is known as lyric. Why? Because it was sung in the company of a musical instrument called a lyre. Okay, subjectivity, brevity, single idea, music, all these are the important characteristics of lyric which make this poetry a beautiful poetry. Lyric enjoyed its good days, its successful days, heydays during the Elizabethan age and also during the period of Romantic revival. Friends, here I finish my discussion. If you have any questions or doubts, do write to me in the comment section of this channel. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel if you really liked this video. Thank you very much.